Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I know I don't show my face, and I know some of you have been asking why. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that will explain everything. It's about corporate corruption, data manipulation, and how one discovery changed my life forever. This isn't just another corporate scandal story, this is personal. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let me tell you about the day I discovered my company was stealing from millions of people. My name? Well, let's just say you can call me Alex. I'm 26 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was a data analyst at TechFlow Solutions, one of the biggest customer data management companies in Silicon Valley. You've probably never heard of them, but they handle personal information for some of the largest retailers, banks, and social media platforms in the world. I moved to San Francisco 3 years ago with a computer science degree and big dreams. My parents had saved every penny to put me through college, and I was determined to make them proud. TechFlow wasn't Google or Apple, but it was a solid company with good benefits and the kind of stable career my immigrant parents had always dreamed of for me. I spent my days analyzing customer behavior patterns, identifying trends that our clients could use to improve their marketing strategies. It was detailed work that required patience and precision, qualities I'd inherited from my mother, who had spent 20 years as a seamstress, examining every stitch with meticulous care. The office was typical Silicon Valley: open floor plan, ping-pong tables, free kombucha, and motivational posters about disrupting the status quo. My manager, Brad Richardson, was the kind of guy who wore designer jeans to work and talked about synergistic solutions and leveraging core competencies. He'd hired me himself, said he was impressed by my ability to spot anomalies in large datasets. Most people see numbers, he'd told me during my interview. I need someone who sees stories. For 2.5 years, I kept my head down, worked long hours, and built a reputation as someone who could find patterns others missed. I wasn't the office social butterfly. I usually skipped the happy hours and company retreats, but I was good at my job, and that seemed to be enough. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was analyzing customer purchase data for Retail Max, one of our biggest clients, when I noticed something strange. The data showed that customers were making purchases they'd never actually made. Expensive items bought with their stored payment information, but with shipping addresses that didn't match their profiles. At first, I thought it was a system error, maybe a glitch in how we were importing transaction data. But as I dug deeper, I realized the pattern was too consistent to be random. Someone was using customer payment information to make unauthorized purchases, and the money was being funneled through a network of fake addresses. I spent the next week quietly investigating, staying late after my colleagues had gone home. What I found made my stomach turn. This wasn't just affecting Retail Max customers. It was happening across multiple client accounts. Credit card information was being harvested and used to make fraudulent purchases, with the money disappearing into a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts. The most disturbing part? The fraud was being conducted through our own systems. Someone with administrative access was manipulating customer data, adding fake transactions that looked legitimate in our reports, but resulted in real money being stolen from real people. I documented everything I found: screenshots of suspicious transactions, flowcharts showing how the money moved, and a detailed analysis of which accounts were affected. Over 200,000 customers had been victimized, with individual losses ranging from $50 to $5,000. The total amount stolen was approaching $15 million. When I knocked on Brad's office door that Friday afternoon, my hands were shaking. He was on a call, gesturing for me to wait outside, but I could see his collection of industry awards lined up on his bookshelf and his expensive watch glinting in the afternoon light. "What's up, Alex?" he asked when he finally waved me in. I placed my folder on his desk, my voice steady despite my nerves. "I found something in our client data that you need to see." Brad's expression changed as he flipped through my documentation. The confident smile faded, replaced by something I'd never seen before: fear. This is... He paused, closing the folder. This is a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, I said. It's data. Look at the patterns, the timing, the routing numbers. Someone is using our system to commit fraud. Brad leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming on the desk. Alex, I appreciate your thoroughness, but you're misinterpreting what you're seeing. These are legitimate promotional transactions. Special offers for select customers. Promotional transactions to addresses that don't exist? For customers who never opted in? The marketing department handles those campaigns. It's above your pay grade. I felt my face flush. Brad, this is fraud. We need to report this to the authorities. His voice dropped to a whisper. No, we don't. We need to forget this conversation ever happened. The silence stretched between us for what felt like forever. Finally, Brad opened his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. Take a long weekend, he said. Think about what's really important here. Your career, your future, your family's expectations. Don't throw it all away over a misunderstanding. I left his office without taking the card. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the faces behind those customer accounts, people who trusted companies like ours to protect their information, who were probably struggling to understand why their bank accounts were being drained. My parents had always taught me that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always necessary. My father had worked 3 jobs to put me through college, believing that education would give me opportunities he'd never had. How could I use those opportunities to look the other way while people were being robbed? Monday morning, I arrived at work to find my access badge wasn't working. Security let me in, but when I tried to log into my computer, my credentials had been deactivated. Technical difficulties, the IT guy said when I called. Should be fixed by noon. It wasn't. At 2:30 p.m., I got a call from HR. Alex, we need to see you in conference room B. Sarah from Human Resources was there, along with someone I didn't recognize. A middle-aged woman in an expensive suit who introduced herself as the company's legal counsel. Due to budget constraints and organizational restructuring, Sarah began, reading from a prepared statement, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. The legal counsel slid a document across the table. This is a separation agreement. It includes a generous severance package, but it requires you to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding any proprietary information you may have encountered during your employment. I looked at the document. The severance was indeed generous, 6 months' salary plus benefits. But the NDA was ironclad, preventing me from discussing anything about TechFlow's business practices or client data. I need time to review this, I said. Take all the time you need, the lawyer replied. But the offer expires at close of business today. I gathered my personal belongings under the watchful eye of a security guard. None of my colleagues met my eyes as I packed up my desk. It was amazing how quickly you could become invisible. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at the separation agreement. The smart play was obvious. Sign the NDA, take the money, find another job, and move on with my life. But I couldn't stop thinking about those 200,000 victims. I'd been careful during my investigation, creating backup copies of everything on a personal drive that I'd kept at home. Technically, it was against company policy to remove proprietary data, but something in Brad's reaction had told me I might need evidence. I opened my laptop and began organizing the files I'd copied. The fraud was even worse than I'd initially thought. Going back through historical data, I could see the pattern had been running for at least 2 years. The thieves had been careful, targeting older customers who might not check their statements as frequently and keeping individual transaction amounts low enough to avoid automatic fraud detection. But here's what really made my blood boil. I found emails between Brad and someone at our parent company, TechFlow Enterprises, discussing the revenue optimization program. They weren't even trying to hide it internally. They called it a gray market monetization strategy and joked about customer contribution programs. They were laughing about stealing from people. I didn't sign the NDA. Instead, I researched cybercrime attorneys and found someone who specialized in whistleblower cases. Jessica Chen had built a reputation taking on tech companies that violated user privacy and trust. Her consultation fee was steep, but I needed to understand my legal options. "You're in a difficult position," she told me after reviewing my evidence. "The data you've collected is compelling, but you obtained it as an employee and removed it from company premises. They'll argue you violated your employment agreement. So I should just let them get away with it? I didn't say that, but you need to understand the risks. TechFlow has deep pockets and experienced legal teams. They'll try to discredit you, claim you're a disgruntled employee seeking revenge." She leaned forward. "However, if what you're showing me is accurate, this could be one of the largest consumer fraud cases in recent history. The FBI has a cybercrime division that handles these cases. That night, I drafted an email to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. I included a summary of what I'd found and offered to provide additional evidence. I hesitated for a long time before hitting send. The response came faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, I received a call from Special Agent Maria Rodriguez, who worked in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. "Mr. Alex," she said, "we'd like to meet with you as soon as possible." The FBI field office was nothing like the movies. Just a standard government building with fluorescent lighting and worn carpet. Agent Rodriguez was professional, but not intimidating, maybe 40 years old with short gray hair and the kind of direct manner that suggested she'd seen everything. "Tell me about TechFlow," she said, after we'd settled into a small conference room. For the next 3 hours, I walked through everything I'd discovered. The fraudulent transactions, the customer data manipulation, the emails between Brad and corporate executives, and the way I'd been fired immediately after raising concerns. Agent Rodriguez took detailed notes and asked pointed questions about the technical aspects of the fraud. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. "This corroborates information we've been gathering from other sources," she said. "TechFlow has been on our radar for several months." "Other sources?" "There was another analyst who contacted us 6 months ago, someone named David Park. He'd found similar patterns but was transferred to a different division before he could gather enough evidence." I felt a chill. "What happened to him?" "He was killed in a car accident 2 weeks after he first contacted us. Could be coincidence, but..." She shrugged. "We take these things seriously." My mouth went dry. "Are you saying they might have..." "I'm saying we need to be careful. TechFlow has connections throughout the industry, and some of their clients have significant political influence. If they're willing to commit fraud on this scale, they might be willing to do other things to protect themselves." Agent Rodriguez handed me a business card with just a phone number. "Don't discuss this with anyone. If you notice anything unusual, anyone following you, strange phone calls, unexpected visitors, call this number immediately." As I left the FBI office, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A gray sedan had been parked outside my apartment building for the past few days, and I'd seen the same car near the coffee shop where I'd met with my lawyer. Paranoia or legitimate concern? I wasn't sure, but I decided to err on the side of caution. I moved out of my apartment that weekend, subletting a small studio in a different neighborhood under a friend's name. The investigation moved quickly once the FBI got involved. Agent Rodriguez explained that they'd been building a case against TechFlow's parent company for several months, following reports of suspicious financial activity. My evidence provided the missing pieces they needed to obtain search warrants. "We're going to need your testimony," she told me during one of our meetings, "both in depositions and possibly in court. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about David Park, about the gray sedan, about the separation agreement I'd refused to sign. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The raids happened on a Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. FBI agents simultaneously executed search warrants at TechFlow's headquarters, the homes of senior executives, and the offices of several shell companies that had been receiving the stolen funds. I watched the news coverage from my studio apartment. Local stations showed footage of FBI agents carrying boxes of documents out of the TechFlow building. Employees stood on the sidewalk looking confused and frightened. The headlines were devastating. Tech company raided in massive fraud investigation. Millions stolen from consumer accounts. FBI uncovers sophisticated identity theft ring. My phone rang constantly. Reporters who'd somehow gotten my number, former colleagues asking if I knew what was happening, and blocked numbers that I didn't answer. By afternoon, the story had gone national. The scope of the fraud was even larger than I'd initially discovered. The FBI found evidence of similar schemes at TechFlow's other subsidiary companies, affecting over 2 million customers and involving more than $50 million in stolen funds. Brad Richardson was arrested at his home in Palo Alto. The news footage showed him being led away in handcuffs while his neighbors watched from their driveways. The CEO of TechFlow Enterprises, Jonathan Walsh, was arrested at the San Francisco airport trying to board a flight to Switzerland. The arraignments were covered live on financial news networks. Walsh, Brad, and 6 other executives were charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. The charges carried potential sentences of up to 20 years in federal prison. Jessica Chen called me that evening. The prosecution wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're offering full immunity in exchange for your testimony. What about the company data I took? Under the circumstances, they're treating it as whistleblower evidence. You're protected by federal law. The next few months were a blur of depositions, interviews, and court appearances. The prosecution's case was airtight. They had the financial records, the internal emails, and testimony from multiple witnesses who'd been afraid to come forward on their own. The defense attorneys tried every strategy Jessica had predicted. They painted me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, questioned my motives, and suggested I'd fabricated evidence. But the financial records didn't lie, and the pattern of fraud was too extensive to be explained away. Brad was the first to flip. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the possibility of decades in prison, he agreed to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed the full scope of the conspiracy, including connections to organized crime groups that had been laundering money through TechFlow's systems. The trial of Jonathan Walsh and the other executives lasted 6 weeks. I testified for 2 days, walking the jury through the technical aspects of the fraud and explaining how I'd discovered the pattern. Walsh's attorney tried to discredit me, but the evidence spoke for itself. The jury convicted on all counts. Walsh received a 15-year sentence, while the other executives got terms ranging from 5 to 12 years. Brad, thanks to his cooperation, received 3 years and was ordered to pay restitution to the victims. But the story didn't end with the convictions. The civil lawsuits were just beginning. Law firms across the country filed class action suits on behalf of the fraud victims. The settlements eventually totaled over $200 million, paid out of TechFlow's remaining assets and insurance policies. I was eligible for a substantial reward under the federal whistleblower program, 15% of the penalties and recovered funds. The amount was life-changing, more money than I'd ever imagined having. But the real reward was knowing that the victims would be compensated and that the people responsible were facing consequences for their actions. The tech industry took notice. New regulations were implemented requiring stronger oversight of customer data handling. Several companies proactively upgraded their security systems and fraud detection protocols. Business schools began teaching the TechFlow case as an example of corporate ethics gone wrong. 6 months after the trials ended, I was working as a cybersecurity consultant, helping companies identify vulnerabilities in their data protection systems. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was being paid to find the same kind of problems that had gotten me fired from TechFlow. I'd also started this YouTube channel, sharing stories about corporate corruption and data privacy issues. I don't show my face because, honestly, I'm still cautious about my safety. Some of the people connected to TechFlow had connections to dangerous organizations, and while most of them were in prison, not all of them were. But I wanted to tell these stories because I think they matter. Every time a company violates your trust, every time executives put profits over people, every time someone looks the other way when they should speak up, these aren't just abstract news stories. They're about real people suffering real consequences. I get messages from viewers who've spotted suspicious activity at their own companies, who've found the courage to report fraud because they heard about what happened at TechFlow. Some of them have faced retaliation, lost jobs, been threatened by powerful interests, but they've also helped stop crimes and protect innocent people. The gray sedan stopped following me about a year ago. I still check my rearview mirror more than most people, still keep multiple backups of important files, still maintain a healthy skepticism about corporate motives. But I sleep better knowing that the people who stole from 2 million customers are behind bars. Would I do it again? Absolutely. The cost was high. I lost my job, spent months in legal proceedings, and had to rebuild my career from scratch. But the alternative was living with the knowledge that I'd stayed silent while people were being robbed. My parents understood, eventually. They'd immigrated to America believing it was a place where hard work and honesty were rewarded, where the system protected ordinary people from those who would exploit them. When I explained what I'd found at TechFlow, my father nodded and said, "You did what we raised you to do." The whistleblower reward money sits mostly untouched in investment accounts. I've used some of it to help other whistleblowers pay legal fees, to support organizations that fight corporate corruption, and to fund this channel. The rest is there for security. Insurance against the possibility that speaking truth to power might cost me everything again. I bought a small house in the mountains outside San Francisco, far from the tech industry bustle. It has a garden that my mother loves when she visits, and a home office where I can work without worrying about who might be listening. The tech industry has largely moved on from the TechFlow scandal. New companies have emerged, new technologies have captured headlines, and the news cycle has shifted to other crises. But the lessons remain relevant. Every day, companies collect vast amounts of personal data about their customers. They know what you buy, where you go, who you talk to, what you search for online. Most of them use this information responsibly, but some don't. And when they don't, ordinary people suffer. The only defense against corporate corruption is transparency and accountability. Companies need to know that their employees won't stay silent when they witness wrongdoing. Regulators need to know that whistleblowers will come forward with evidence of fraud, and the public needs to know that their personal information is being protected. That's why I started this channel. That's why I tell these stories. Because in a world where corporations have more power than ever before, the only way to keep them honest is to shine light on their darkest corners. I get asked sometimes if I regret my decision to speak up. The answer is no. I regret that the fraud happened in the first place. I regret that 2 million people had their trust violated and their money stolen. I regret that it took so long for the truth to come out. But I don't regret finding the courage to do what was right. 3 years after the TechFlow raids, I received an unexpected message through my YouTube channel. It was from someone who identified themselves as a current TechFlow employee. The company had been acquired by a competitor and was operating under new management. "I wanted to thank you," the message said. "Because of what you did, we have strict data protection protocols now, real oversight, regular audits. The culture is completely different. People know they can report concerns without fear of retaliation." That message meant more to me than any financial reward or media coverage. It meant that the sacrifice had been worth it, that the system had actually changed for the better. The person who sent that message was named Emma Chen, no relation to my lawyer. She was a junior data analyst, about the same age I'd been when I first discovered the fraud. She'd been hired specifically to help implement the new security measures, and she wanted me to know that my story had inspired her to choose a career in data ethics. We started corresponding and eventually met for coffee. She reminded me of myself at that age. idealistic, hardworking, and perhaps a little naive about how the business world really operated. "Aren't you worried about the same thing happening again?" she asked. "Different company, same temptations?" "Always," I said. "But that's exactly why we need people like you watching, ready to speak up when something's wrong." Emma nodded. "I keep copies of everything suspicious I find, just in case." "Good," I said. "But be careful. Make sure you document everything properly and find someone you trust to help you if you ever need to report something." She pulled out a business card and handed it to me. "My manager gave me this. She said if I ever found anything concerning, this person could help." I looked at the card. It was Agent Rodriguez's contact information. "Smart manager," I said. "Keep that card safe." As I drove home that day, I thought about how much had changed. The TechFlow scandal had created ripple effects throughout the industry. Other companies had implemented stronger oversight, regulators had updated their guidelines, and a new generation of tech workers understood that they had both the power and the responsibility to protect consumer data. The work wasn't finished. It never would be. As long as there were large amounts of money and personal data involved, there would be people willing to abuse the system. But now there were also people watching, ready to sound the alarm when something went wrong. That evening, I sat down to record a new video for my channel. The topic was data security in the age of artificial intelligence, how new technologies were creating new opportunities for both innovation and exploitation. "Remember," I said to the camera, "the most sophisticated fraud schemes rely on people staying quiet. They depend on employees who see something wrong but convince themselves it's not their problem. They count on customers who notice suspicious activity but assume someone else will handle it." I paused, thinking about Emma Chen and the thousands of other young professionals entering the tech industry. But here's the thing about truth. It has a way of coming out. And when it does, the people who chose to stay silent always regret it more than those who chose to speak up. I ended the video with my usual sign-off. Stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and remember, in a world full of noise, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to stay quiet. The video received over 100,000 views in its first week. The comments were mostly positive, with viewers sharing their own stories of workplace fraud and corporate corruption. But there were also messages from people working in data security, thanking me for highlighting the importance of their work. One comment stood out. It was from someone with the username Data Ethics Warrior, who wrote, "Thank you for sharing your story. It gave me the courage to report suspicious activity at my company. The investigation is ongoing, but I know I did the right thing because of your example." That comment reminded me why I'd started this channel in the first place. It wasn't about the views or the ad revenue. It was about creating a space where people could learn from each other's experiences, where whistleblowers could find support, and where the truth could have a platform. The TechFlow case had taught me that corruption thrives in silence, but it withers in the light. Every story shared, every pattern exposed, every act of courage recognized, these all contributed to a culture where doing the right thing was possible, even when it was difficult. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt a familiar sense of purpose. Tomorrow I would continue the work, investigating new cases, supporting other whistleblowers, and using this platform to shine light on corporate wrongdoing. The gray sedan was long gone, but vigilance remained. Not out of fear, but out of responsibility. I'd been given a second chance to make a difference, and I wasn't going to waste it. The last thing I did before turning off my laptop was check the news. A major retailer had just announced a data breach affecting 50 million customers. The story was just breaking, details were scarce, but something about the company's response statement didn't sit right with me. I bookmarked the article and made a note to investigate further. Old habits, I suppose. Once you've seen how easy it is for companies to hide the truth, you never stop looking for the signs. But that's a story for another day. For now, I'll leave you with this. In a world where your personal information is more valuable than ever, the people protecting it are the last line of defense between you and those who would exploit you.